Let's do some math, shall we? This is Wretched Radio. I'm your head-colded host, Todd. We couldn't tell. We thought you had a boxing glove shoved up each nostril. No, it's just a little thing. Don't get this thing, by the way. It's not fun. And you will be taking more cold medicine, Mucinex. You trust me on this one. You get what I got, the thing that seems to be going around, and you will look exactly like the Mucinex commercial. You're going to produce that character. That's all I'm saying. Don't get sick. Speaking of using drugs, from Imprimis, it is a publication, 3.9 million readers monthly. It's produced by Hillsdale College. Alex Berenson, graduate of Yale University, history and economics guy, decided, I'm going to do a little sleuth in here as a journalist to see if there is a connection between marijuana, mental illness, and violence. So here's where we're at in the math equation so far. It appears quite clear. Now, I know there's a difference between correlation and connection, but it appears quite clear. The evidence seems to be overwhelming that regular marijuana use causes mental illness, breaks from reality, psychosis. Now the question is, what does psychosis create? What does that produce? A more peaceful pot smoker? Dude, it's all like chill. And the answer is psychosis has a shockingly high risk factor for violence. People with schizophrenia, 5 times as likely to commit violent crimes as healthy people, and almost 20 times as likely to commit homicide. Schizophrenia is rare, but people with the disorder commit an appreciable fraction of all murders, in the range of 6 to 9%. A 2010 review of earlier studies in Schizophrenia Bulletin found that 27% of people with schizophrenia have been diagnosed with cannabis use disorder. In other words, they smoke it every day. And unfortunately, despite its reputation for making y'all relaxed and calm, it appears to provoke many of them to violence. In other words, this isn't good for our culture. Besides, has anybody ever, you're a manager and you're looking to hire somebody for a task. You know, what we really need in this position is somebody who gets high every day on marijuana, because I just find them to be more productive workers. That has never been uttered by anyone. Young men with psychosis who use cannabis had a 50% chance of becoming violent. That's 4 times higher than those with psychosis who didn't use marijuana. And that's even if after they adjusted for alcohol use factors. It has, I think, a clear link to violence. Are we seeing less crime or are we seeing more violent crime? Maybe the percentages are lower because of the number of people in the country, but I suspect that the number of violent crimes, when you hear about these murder sprees, when you hear about these people killing family members, shouldn't we at least be willing to talk about these things instead of just being told, no, people need it for medical use? Here's the story of a child who was throwing up every day until they started smoking pot. Okay, anecdotes are not what we need. Sentimentality is not what is needed. In this instance, we don't, as Christians, we use our Bible and say, no, this is a sin to consume this stuff. It's just a sin. It's not an adiaphoron. It's not a gray issue. It is a sin. And the science supports that position. Before states legalized recreational pot, advocates said that legalization would let police focus on hardened criminals, thus reducing violent crime. Remember that? They claim that legalization has reduced violent crime. In a 2017 speech calling for federal legalization, U.S. Senator Cory Booker, the vegetarian, said that states that have legalized marijuana are seeing decreases in violent crime. Did you hear that? I did. He's a U.S. senator. He must be right. He's wrong. The first 4 states to legalize marijuana Colorado and Washington, 2014, then Alaska and Oregon in 2015. Combined, those 4 states had 450 murders and 30,000 aggravated assaults at that time. Last year, 620 murders with 38,000 aggravated assaults. In other words, it went up 37 and 25% respectively, far greater than the national increase. Is it the water? Is it the type of TV programs that people are watching in Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and Oregon? Or is it pot? Cannabis is also associated with a disturbing number of child deaths from abuse and neglect, way more than alcohol. So to those people who go, well, people get drunk and do... I know that. It really isn't salient to the conversation. You don't use one to promote the other. It either stands or falls on its own merits. And here's the reality. The number of kids that are being hurt by this because of pot is more than kids of cocaine and methamphetamine and opioid users combined. This is indeed shocking business that we heard. And it goes on and on. You can sign up, I guess, somehow for Imprimis. It's at Hillsdale College. And you can hillsdale.edu if you'd like, hillsdale.edu. But wow, is that an eye-opener? Now, it maybe doesn't shock you totally because we used to just go, duh, of course it's a bad idea. Well, today it's not. And we want to, as Christians, be mindful of the science, but ultimately it will come down to this, like it does with every single issue. Think about what's going on these days with the life issue. And I just, what's her, Bette Midler, I don't know how I saw this. Bette Midler, this is my news feed. To outlaw late-term abortions is barbaric and criminal. What?
Do they?
I don't think we're going to reason with Bette. You mean, what you're telling me is that stopping the dismembering of a child who is about to be born, saying we don't want, that's barbaric, but the practice itself isn't. You can use all the science that you want, and all you're going to get are emotive responses. And so I think ultimately what we are left with as Christians is what is heard, I think, four or 7,000 times in the Old Testament, thus saith the Lord. This is what God says about the issue. And besides, it doesn't deal with people's problems. I think the increase of pot use, opioid addiction, all of it comes down to a lack of Christian worldview, that these people are adrift and they are unhappy. I'm telling you, wait a second. I got to find this for you. Hold on. Somebody sent this. I think Daniel sent this in. It happened to be a quote from Grace to You, a recent sermon that was done. A guy from Harvard, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on. Maybe I've got it in this stack. Well, I've got it in a stack someplace. That they were saying that this is Harvard. This was a secular study that we can anticipate a greater amount of violence. We can anticipate a greater number of suicides. I found it right here. Dr. Armand Nikolai II of Harvard Medical School sees the trend to destroy the family as a devastating trend, pointing to married women with children working outside the home, the tendency for families to move frequently, almost constantly, the dominance of television in the home, the lack of controls in society, the chaos of moral confusion, the lack of communication among families, and divorce. And all of those things are threatening the very life which we live. Last night, went to a restaurant, made a very big mistake. Hadn't eaten all day, and I thought, you know what? Pizza and pasta are a great combination. And as we're walking out, I see the grandmother and the mother having a conversation at the table while the 2-year-old granddaughter has a glow on her face because the electronic device is so close. She's not engaged. She doesn't have to be involved. She goes off into a world all of her own. What is going to be the effect of that? I think we're seeing that. People detached from their families, people not having the basic things that God has put in place for human flourishing. And the results are just disastrous. And I think a lot of them ultimately, to escape this miserable reality, because everything is broken, is to use pot and opioids. That tells me, dear Christian, we have an opportunity. You're looking for a segue into the gospel? How are you feeling these days? Are you feeling connected? Feeling lonely? Feeling sad? Feeling angry? Feeling lost? Let's see if we can figure out why. And we can then lead them to the cross, which then goes about the business of fixing all of those issues for people. So I look at the pot business, and it's annoying. We're being lied to. But I think there's a connection here to a lack of people who understand the gospel. In other words, this is actually an opportunity. This is Wretched Radio.